At long last, yet again, Dr. Jim has returned. As the semester is winding down, we're hoping to have more of these conversations, make it regular again, and return to Aristotle's politics. We're not doing the politics here and now, but we're going to talk a little bit of Aristotle. I was chatting with Jim today, and we always like to have a theme for these kind of fun Friday episodes. And Jim threw out Aristotle's philosophy of religion. I said, that sounds like an interesting theme. So here we are, and that's what we're going to explore. Dr. Jim, thanks for being here.
Good to be back, man. Good to be back.
Yeah. What's new? What's happening? Give us all the updates.
Not much. Getting through the semester. Just kind of halfway through final exams right now. Let me mute this sucker here 1 second.
Cool.
One of my kids just got back from a harebrained trip to Egypt, but he came back intact. So
okay, cool.
My son Pat, who's waiting to leave for Madrid to go to school, just bought a plane ticket and went to Cairo for a week, right? And
baller, man.
Made it work, yeah.
Yeah, of all the places, like I would be interested in seeing some things there, but I don't think that'd be the first place I'd hop to if I were just to buy a plane ticket to anywhere. Yeah. But good, man. Glad he seems like he enjoyed himself, I hope, and made it back.
He did, man. He did. He had quite the adventure, and like the plans all went sideways, and he had to like bribe the right local dudes, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah, man.
At one point, he was in the back of a cab in traffic in Cairo with a cabbie who barely spoke any English, who was claiming that the Airbnb that he had planned to go to didn't exist. And he realized then either he was being ripped by the cabbie or he'd been ripped by whoever sold him the Airbnb. But here's the deal. He's in the man's car. So this is, you have to go with this now, right? And he maneuvered it and ended up with a really nice place to stay in Egypt, and hustled it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely fascinating, man. So good. All right, well, let's get into the topic, then we'll have some fun. If we have some time, we'll do some Q&A if people want to drop any questions in. So what do you have on? Nothing fancy, dude. As you know, I'm a keto girl living in a keto world, so we just got the sparkly water here today. Nice. Pellegrino, a little bit of ice. How about you?
I'm having an Americano.
Nice, dude.
Like an espresso. My kids gave me an espresso machine for my birthday, which means I've gone to the fentanyl stage of the caffeine addiction, right?
Yeah. So out of curiosity, what's your intake like these days?
Well, what I do is I drink my normal few cups of coffee in the morning, and then rather than like making another pot in the afternoon, I just have an espresso.
Okay.
I'm probably drinking total less coffee than I was, but I don't know what the milligrams of caffeine go to, right?
Okay. I don't think you're as bad as Gavin still. Gavin, I know, is just an insane amount of coffee, and then he drinks those monster drinks on top of it. I would be in the hospital, man.
Never touched that stuff. Yeah, never touched that stuff.
All right. Aristotle's philosophy of religion. What do we got? Sorry. What do we got today, Jim?
Okay, so as you know, Pat, I have an unrepentant man crush on C.D.C. Reeve, right?
Yep.
His reading of Aristotle, his translations, the introductions to those books for Hackett have really kind of moved my views around about Aristotle. And what just came out was this thing. This came out this fall, Aristotle's Theology, the primary text. Sounds like he's prepping for a book on Aristotle's Theology. This is like the first stage of, right?
Interesting.
Which I'm excited about. But anyway, so I've been tooling around with that. And there's a passage in here that I was glad to see Reeve cites, because while teaching the metaphysics 2 years ago, I had never noticed this passage before in Aristotle. It really struck me as an interesting passage that we don't really see commented on very often. Okay. And I think it's giving us a sense of what Aristotle's philosophy of religion is, as opposed to his metaphysics. Okay. I mean, by opposed, I don't mean that they're at odds, but in distinction from his metaphysics. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think like what we call philosophy of religion today, or a great deal of it, Aristotle would chalk up as a department of metaphysics. So you start looking like for first cause arguments, right? You start, looking at even problem of evil, the way, depending on how it's executed. Right, Aristotle would actually put that under metaphysics.
Yeah, we should actually clarify that, right? Because philosophy of religion, for people who aren't in certain philosophical circles might sound confusing. It's not like, hey, we're looking at all these religious philosophies and we're examining and comparing them. That's not usually what's meant by philosophy of religion. Really, philosophy of religion is something like a sort of worldview comparison project, if that makes sense. It's like, let's construct some large scale theory of everything, and let's it kind of works in a sort of scientific mode of thinking. A lot of it does. A lot of it sort of moved away from traditional metaphysics, where it's like we'll construct this large scale theory, and then we'll see how well this theory predicts and explains, really common features of the world that we think need to be explained versus some other theory, and then we'll try and adjudicate what the best theory is. But you said, traditionally, when it comes to kind of getting your fundamentals straight, it was often sort of done through more traditional metaphysics. It wasn't like hypothesis testing. It was just like, let's carve reality at its joints, find necessary conditions. Oh, necessary condition is classical theism or whatever, or something like that. So there's just a lot of different ways people could think about this. So it's probably worth trying to get some initial clarity, right?
It would be interesting to see. I wonder if anyone's ever done this. I mean, hey, dude, someone write a dissertation on this, because one, you need to have a dissertation on something. Okay.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see like the disciplinary history of how philosophy of religion came about, right? Because when you look at it, like, as far as I can tell, in like the 50s, 60s, 30s, 40s, the last century, where analytic philosophy is coming online, philosophy of religion it's not really about the metaphysics of theism, right? It's about like, what is the standing of religion as such epistemically? Like, what is it to be religion, right? And could one be justified in doing that? Do you see what I mean? Like, how do we look at the relationships among different religions? What is the relationship of religion and science and all this stuff? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And even when you look at like going back in the 19th century, when Hegel is giving lectures on the philosophy of religion, he's not talking about like first cause stuff necessarily, right? He's talking about what is it to be religion? Like, what role does religion play in the human life? What is its ethical place? All that sort of thing. You see what I mean? And, or even like think of like Kant's religion within the bounds of reason alone, right? He leaves the natural theological stuff out of that story, right? That he's done all that in the Second Critique, and now he's doing this other thing. Like, what is it to be religious? Like, can a reasonable person do this? Okay.
Yep.
And so when I think of philosophy of religion, that's what I think of actually. Like, so for instance, when I teach a philosophy of religion course, we've got a metaphysics course, we've got a natural theology course. Okay, so I'm not doing anything like that in my philosophy of religion courses. I'm looking more at like what is the standing intellectually of things like myths, which would be relevant to what we're looking at in this passage from Aristotle. Okay.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because that is different than than even how I was thinking about it. I'm familiar with that way of thinking about it, but now that sort of reframes how I'm going to approach this conversation, which is important.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, it's important. It's important to be on the same page, right? And and the thing is that these are all like academic disciplinary boundaries are at best conventional, right? At best,
for sure.
Yeah, but I think we get too bent on this stuff. Do you know what I mean? But just when I say philosophy of religion, I don't necessarily mean anything that has anything to do with natural theology or metaphysics. I see those are. We've got like I'm much more traditional minded on that. We've got disciplines for that, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's but like you, I can't help myself a lot of times. So like I much prefer the traditional metaphysics. I think when we think about God, this is the best way to do it. But dang it, man, it's hard to avoid that Bayesian tennis game every now and then.
But also there's to whom do you want to speak? And if you're going to talk to people, you can't just be a stubborn jerk and say, well, that's not how they talked about it in the old days, and I'm going to have a conversation to myself in the corner now, right? I mean, you have to. I know. The thing is, when you make concessions to these kinds of conventions, it's not always going to have like entirely innocent consequences for what you have to say, because now you have to fit what you have to say into another kind of dialogue, right?
Right.
And that might be things that you wanted to say don't translate into this other kind of disciplinary matrix, okay, famously. But then you have to make a choice. Is like, do you want to have a broader conversation or not? And I think this is always this trade-off. Like, how much of what is dearest to me am I willing to give up in order to have a kind of relevance, right?
Yeah, that's a really important reminder and thing to think about. So, okay, please continue down the path.
Dark things that keeps me awake at night.
But good. Yeah. All right. So you keep going on the path you wanted to go down as I reorient. now.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, maybe I should have given you a heads up. Right.
That's all right.
Okay. So I'm using Reeves' primary text in Aristotle's Theology, but you can find this passage in Aristotle's Metaphysics, obviously, where Reeves is taking it from. I sent it to you in that message. I don't know if we can pull it up, but I'm just planning to just kind of read it here. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and read it. I'll see if I can get the text and maybe paste it somewhere for people who.
This is coming from Aristotle's Metaphysics, Book 12, Chapter 8. Okay. It's actually the very last paragraph in Book 12 of the Metaphysics. Okay, so I want to read it. The whole thing's not very long, and then let's go back through because I think there's 3 distinct phases of this thing that we should look at independently. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so quoting Aristotle, there is a. Oh wait, let me back up. Sorry, I'm a mess. He's just finished his natural theology at this point. He's proven to you that there are gods, right? There are these unmoved,
the unmoved movers, right?
Yeah. The things that are unmoved with respect to things below them on the chain of being, right? So like literally he's showing you like the moon and the sun and the planets, right? Are a kind of divinity in his view. Okay. And then he's proved to you that there has to be a last heaven. Okay. A final moving mover, as he calls it, right? But then he's argued that there has to even be beyond the final moving mover, be an unmoved mover, which he calls the God. Okay. Yeah. And so what he's done, though, he thinks that he's done this scientifically in all the senses of the words, right? Because he begins with like first order sciences, like literally his chemistry, his physics, his meteorology. We always ignore that, right? But his meteorology, right? All his sub-sciences, and shows that for there to be intelligibility, there has to be an unmoved mover above those realms for each of those realms. But then for there to be intelligibility, there has to be unmoved movers above each of those realms, culminating in the first heaven, and then ultimately culminating in the unmoved mover. Okay.
Yep.
So now that project's done. Okay. And then we get this little kind of aside.
And that is a thick soup, my friend.
That's a thick soup. Yeah. I know we've been like threatening to go through that for a couple of years now. And I just,
well, maybe after the politics we'll come to
maybe after the politics. Yeah. But that is a thick soup. Although I am dragging my intro students through it next semester just because, I want to read this.
Every student's dragged through there. You have to be dragged through Aristotle. Exactly. There's no other way. You just have to be dragged through it. Right. Yeah.
First okay. Time. So the backdrop is he thinks he has a completed metaphysical natural theology, right? / completed physics too, right? In his back pocket here. Okay. Right. So it's like, or at least he thinks he's demonstrated that such a science is out there to be had, whether he has it or not. I think that's an interesting question, whether he thinks he has it. Okay. So then he says, now, that being said, right? According to Aristotle, there is a tradition handed down from the ancients of the earliest times and bequeathed to posterity in the shape of a myth, to the effect that the heavenly bodies are gods and that the divine encompasses the whole of nature. The rest of the tradition has been added later in a mythical way, with a view to the persuasion of ordinary people and with a view to its use for legal purposes and for what is advantageous. For they say that these gods are human in form or like some of the other animals, and also other features that follow from or are similar to those just mentioned. But if we separate the first point from these additions and grasp it alone, namely that they thought that the primary substances were gods, we would have to regard it as divinely said, and that while it is likely that each craft and each philosophy has often been developed as far as possible, only to pass away again, these beliefs about the gods have survived like remnants until the present. In any case, the belief of our forefathers and of our earliest predecessors is to this extent alone illuminating to us, end quote. Okay. So I think that's just fabulous and spooky what's going on in that passage. Okay. All right. Any impressions up front before I start?
Yeah, no, I have a lot of impressions, and you're right. This is not, when you first sent it to me and I read it, I'm like, where? I don't remember this, right?
Yeah.
And look, I've been through Aristotle.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming I'm some sort of master of Aristotle, but I've spent my time with Aristotle, and I just for whatever reason, I'm sure I've been over it, but it just never stuck with me or something
Yeah.
like that. So I'll just say that first. But
I had been dragged through Aristotle's Metaphysics and dragged myself and others in many times through that book. And it wasn't until the last time I taught it that I noticed this. Yeah.
Well, you need these things pointed out because if we're being honest with Aristotle, at least for me, it's like, man, once you're 2 paragraphs in, your eyes start glazing over with Aristotle, like the physics and metaphysics. So it's not surprising that you might have been through it, but certain things might not have stuck.
So it's interesting. So I think what we see here with Aristotle is, I think there's kind of like 3 levels of I want to use belief innocently here. Okay.
Sure.
So one, there's what he's thinking he's hit now, the highest level, scientific. Okay. Capital S, episteme for the Greeks, Wissenschaften for the Germans, right?
Yep.
Like systematic getting it, right?
Yeah. It's demonstrated.
Okay. Demonstrated. Okay. So, and he thinks he's got that, like, boom, man, the planets are, intelligible, they're minds, right? Okay. And, there's a mind outside of mind, all those minds that is ultimately lending intelligibility to the whole thing. Okay. He's got that scientifically. Now he says, but wait, it seems like he's got some sense that there was an ancient prehistoric sense of this, right? That, like he says, like in the earliest times, the ancients had a sense, and as he puts it here, that the heavenly bodies are gods and that the divine encompasses the whole of nature. Okay, so it seems like he's saying there's like a fundamental natural human insight, right? And he even says later in the passage it's revelatory, right? There's kind of a basic revelation humans have that, like, the nature is enchanted, and in nature, as he says, is encompassed by divinity. I think it's a good way that he think about how he thinks about what the God is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's almost like that's built in, right? There's a kind of a human revelation for that. Okay. But then he says second tier, that gets mythologized. I mean, because it's hard to talk to the kids about that.
Yeah.
Right? And then thereby it seems he's saying gets abused. It becomes mythologized.
Becomes sort of a noble lie, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because he's he went to Plato's school, right?
Yeah, it's a noble lie that has a real foundation. So it's not like a complete fabrication. But I like the way you say it's not like so many modern skeptics, like, oh, religion was just entirely invented, soup to nuts, to control the masses or whatever. He's like, no, there's a real divine kernel here, but it's been abused for the purposes of gaining advantages.
What I find interesting about this, he's going to tip his hat, right, to the kind of like Chris Hitchens, Richard Dawkins thing, like, Nietzschean thing, Schopenhauerian thing. Like, hasn't this stuff just been like used and abused to control and confuse and the masses? And Aristotle's like, yeah, totally, right. He's saying like there's this human insight into like the kind of the divine foundations of nature, and then that got co-opted into this mythology that's going to say, no, the planet's like it really is a dude in a chariot, flying over the earth, right? Yeah. And you know what I mean? And we should like placate him, and I know how, and so do what I tell you. You know what I mean? And so he's admitting like this insight can be mythologized in healthy ways and unhealthy ways, and sadly, it's been mostly very unhealthy, right? Or very, he says, for legal and for reasons of advantage. And I think in the Greek that means like my advantage over you. Okay?
Sure.
All right. But now, okay, so like the human origin is with this like insight into the divine nature of reality. Where that comes from, don't know, right? Then there's like this mythological stage of it. But now he's saying, like, scientifically, he's seen a kind of confirmation of the original insight independent of the mythology.
Right.
It's sort of like he's doing this like demythologization of like the Greek popular religion handed down to him, right? Both for purposes of science, but also as a confirmation of like the basic intuitions of human nature.
Right. And he's got the sort of philosophical core of a religious system, but he sort of stripped it of those mythological elements that have been artificially put onto it for reasons of advantage.
Yeah. Right? And so one, I just find that fascinating, like this 3-tiered thing that's going on here.
Oh, right? Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
There's this insight, right? This basic primordial insight into what he's calling, the divinity of things in nature and the encompassing of nature by divinity. Then there's this mythologization, which is mostly distorting of that, right? And then there's the possibility of recovering that insight, right, through a later scientific development. Okay. And so that's interesting right there. We can go back to that. But then there's two at the end here, very interesting. So he says, each craft and each philosophy has often been deployed as far as possible, only to pass away again. These beliefs about gods have survived like remnants until the present. Okay, so it seems he's saying like he's got this like notion of history of thought here. You don't usually think of Aristotle as like a historical thinker, right? So he says, each craft and each philosophy, has been developed as far as possible and then passes away. So he seems to be saying like there was a way of thinking about things. It gets humanity to a certain point and then it passes away. It's like, there's like almost like a Hegelian dialect.
I was going to say Hegel, somebody phone Hegel, right?
Hegel would claim to have learned a lot of this stuff from Aristotle, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if I can find this in Hegel, right? But like there's like, so he seems to be saying like they're these myths, these things, they have their time. Okay. They get us as far as they can, right? But then it seems like they're going to be shed, right? Moving towards this like more scientific insight of it. Do you see that?
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. And could be interesting, could be very troubling to the religious believer too. Cause like, okay, what else is going to get passed up? Right. And then last, I love this last line. In any case, so leaving that aside, in any case, the belief of our forefathers and of our earliest predecessors is to some extent alone illuminating to us. Okay. Now, what that's saying to me is, I think the us here is we Aristotelian scientists who have now gone through the process of getting ourselves, logos through scientific power and all that, right? But still, he's saying that these earliest predecessors have something to teach us, right?
Right.
Their beliefs are somehow illuminating to us. These primordial beliefs, right? Whatever those are. You see what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. And so it seems like there's something for Aristotle that's like leaving out, like holding out some place for like the truly mystical, right? Like that's built into the human experience of nature.
Yeah.
That would illuminate even the science. You know what I mean? Because it seems like we think of ourselves like this like absolute rationalist, like who like, oh, I've proven the unmoved mover, right? That's the whole story. Close up shop. But now what's he saying here? But wait, these primordial beliefs of our ancestors that got covered over by these silly comic book myths, right? They are still illuminating to us. And I take it the us here is the Aristotelian scientist.
Yeah. No, if I didn't know better, I think we were kind of talking about Plato in a sense, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, what you might like, you've been reading Gerson, right? Is like the difference between these guys is way overstated. Yeah,
it is way overstated, and I always thought it was significantly overstated just by reading the two guys, right? I mean, if you just read Plato and Aristotle, you're like, okay, these guys clearly aren't like super at odds, right? And Plato goes to town on. I mean, Aristotle goes to town on Plato a good amount, but he does it because he thinks he's closest to the truth, right? They're a lot closer than they are, modern philosophers to Aristotle or something like that. So enchantment, and I'm getting enchantment. I'm getting enchanted vibes and spooky vibes from all of this, which is sweet.
But for Aristotle, the enchantment isn't that there really is like a guy named Neptune that's swimming around in the sea. Right?
Yeah, he's rejecting Zeus on top of the mountain, for sure.
Yeah, he's rejecting the comic book version of enchantment, right? Which in that one Substack, I accuse Goff of not getting over. But anyway,
right? Yeah,
like he's rejecting the comic version of enchantment, but he is saying there is this mystical insight that our predecessors had. Okay, that is distinct from his scientific insight that he's arrived at, and is illuminating of that scientific insight.
Right.
And it all has bearing on this notion of divinity suffused in nature.
Yeah, it's almost like a big put up job too, in a way.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And the whole notion of myth is very interesting. One of the best people I still think to read on that is Lewis. He was so good on the notions of myth. And showing a sort of compatibility in a way that Aristotle is himself, I think, indicating, right, is that the myth, even if it's abused, and I don't think Aristotle's saying that all of the mythology is abusive.
Yeah.
Some of it is just meant to be instructive for, maybe people of a certain IQ level, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. It's not meant to be abused, but the myth can itself be pointing to a deeper and more significant truth,
Right.
or poising or posturing you to be more receptive to a truth once it arrives, or once you're ready for it. I think Lewis is good on all that stuff, but the myth itself, of course, can be hijacked and put to nefarious uses and deployed for a noble, or it doesn't even have to be a noble lie. It could be a dishonorable act through and through. Yeah. Good. So, okay. So keep going with this, Jim. What other thoughts do you have on that? And then we'll
and the thing is, see, for me, this passage is just this sort of like, oh man, now here's a whole almost like research project that has to be done now, right? I mean, because like it's opened these interesting questions, like what, even for because I mean, like one, even for Aristotle, it seems like he's saying there is, and I know I keep saying it's this sort of primordial human experience of the mystical or the divine in nature that is illuminating even to natural theology.
Right.
Okay. And it was available through a kind of revelation or direct experience.
Okay. So like, at the end of the day, his natural theology isn't starting from a completely neutral position, even if he thinks that it is.
Yeah. That's one point too. I think that's an important point, right? Because I think he would say the human isn't starting from an entirely neutral position.
Right.
And then you can get into like cognitive science, religion, evolutionary psychology, religion, which is to say, yeah, well, maybe we're just like loaded to go in this direction in the first place for good or ill. And we can talk about whether that has an epistemically ill or epistemically positive effects for religion. I think that's one question, right?
Yep.
But even I think that's one thing. But what I'm getting at here is he's saying that because he says at the end, like, is these primordial beliefs would be illuminating to us, to the natural theologians, so that natural theology itself would not be a complete picture, right? There's something illuminating about these primordial beliefs, right? In addition to natural theology, right?
Yes. Okay. What do you think he's getting at there?
I have no idea, right? But he does say, look, there was this original kind of, insight that the ancients had, like, and remember, like, ancient to an ancient, right? Okay.
Yeah, Aristotle's old.
Yeah, he's old, right? You know what I mean? There was in I think there's like Heidegger stuff that you could get into here too. Is there's this original insight that these ancients had, right, into the divinity of nature. Okay, and that is partly illuminating even to the person who's gone through the process of natural theology. Yes. There is still something else to be learned, even if you have a complete natural theology, right, about the divinity of nature. And what that is, I don't know. What he has in mind there, I don't know. Right.
And that becomes the research project.
That becomes a kind of research project.
There's your PhD, gentle listener.
Yeah, there's your PhD. You're like, what is that?
You're welcome.
Yeah, or I think that's what a lot of these people like Heidegger are getting at. Like what was this initial insight, right, that got the question of being off the ground that we just don't seem that we can really articulate anymore, right? I think Aristotle's like hinting at that here.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for bringing this up. This was totally in a different direction than my first impression of what this conversation is going to be. But that's good. I love it. I love that the gears are really turning now. Perhaps we should, say.
And just it just seems to me that I just think it helps us see, once again, a kind of like mysticism, a kind of Greek pagan reverence that is in Aristotle, right, that we don't expect to find there. Right?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. There, I always took him as a reverent man. Despite how he was purported to dress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, Reeve always he starts all of his books, if I may, right,
talking about his gaudy outfits.
Everyone's translations. He begins the biography, or he includes in the biography with the claim, if I may,
please, yeah. And legend
has it that Aristotle had slender calves and small eyes, spoke with a lisp, and was, quote, conspicuous by his attire, his rings, and the cut of his hair. His will reveals he had a sizable estate, a domestic partner, 2 children, and a considerable library in a large circle of friends. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Not too bad, right?
not too bad. Yeah.
Not too bad.
Like to bling it out a little bit,
Fling it
right?
out. Yeah, he's into clamping, right?
A
Yeah.
little lispy, but still seem to be into the ladies. Right?
Lispy. Let's take some questions. We'll keep the conversation going that way. All right.
bet.
We'll take them. I'll just take them somewhat
Yeah.
randomly here.
Come at it.
Pope Stealth said, "Is God a hypothesis to Aristotle?" No, I don't think so. I think if we think of a hypothesis as something that I kind of construct, if going to the worldview comparison thing, like, hey, here's my large scale theory of everything. It's this picture of naturalism, or it's this picture of classical theism, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to try and find all the relevant data that my large scale theory needs to explain, and then through that method try and select the theory based on its explanatory comprehensiveness and simplicity. No, that's not how Aristotle is reasoning at all. He's doing old-fashioned metaphysics. He thinks that if you just start from those things that are most basic and you roll up your sleeves and you start doing the metaphysical carving, for him it starts in philosophy of nature, then breaks into metaphysics. He just sees this whole soupy system of his as being the sort of necessary conditions for the intelligibility of the universe. So he would say there's just this is a sort of, it's not something that can be later confirmed or disconfirmed by anything you might encounter in the world, like a scientific hypothesis. So I don't know. Do you agree with that,
Yeah,
Jim?
no, I agree. Like one, he's proceeding by this kind of metaphysical demonstration that's actually very foreign to what goes by philosophy of religion today, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's proceeding by a kind of metaphysical definition or demonstration, and moreover, like making the point we just made. And also, he seems to think that there's something like an intuitive insight, a primordial experience of divinity, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of built into human nature. At least it was accessible to like primordial humans, right? That's not a hypothesis either, right? It seems like he's got like, you've got like scientific definition, and then something like, it looks like he's hinting in this passage, direct contact too.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Neither of which are hypotheticals. Yeah.
Kevin's got a good question here. I wonder if there are any parallels here between these ancient pagan religions and any modern religions containing noble lies. Question: do you think that there are any noble lies in Christianity? Jim, you want to take this first, or me?
I mean, I think, well, one, shout out to Kevin. Good to talk to you. I owe you an email. But yeah, I mean, look, I think this is the troubling question that like Aristotle raises, that I think we should honestly ask ourselves, right? He can already see in 4th century Athens that religion is something used and abused for all sorts of reasons. Like, we didn't need like Sigmund Freud and Friedrich Nietzsche to teach us this.
Amazing, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's been on board, and I do think it is fair to ask, like, to what degree has Christianity been used and abused in similar ways, right? Mm-hmm. To what degree, and not even just noble lies, but just plain old lies. To what degree has it been co-opted into that? I think those are fair questions. And I think we do poorly apologetically by just like dismissing that possibility. Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I would want to draw some distinctions here. One is between like a noble lie that is like right down to the root, right? Where something is completely fabricated, it doesn't find any basis in something in reality, which is not what Aristotle just described. He's saying, no, there's something real here, something really divine. And then there's myth around that, and some of that's good and some of it's abused, but that root is real, right? Like the notion of divinity is real. So yeah, and I think he's right about that. I think reason does converge upon divinity. And I definitely don't want to say that's the case for Christianity. I don't think I wouldn't be a Christian if I thought that was the case, right? Have there been liars who are Christians and have abused the religion? Oh, no doubt, often horribly so, right? But is the core of Christianity based on some lie? I certainly hope not. I wouldn't, and I certainly don't think so, based on my look of it, especially when you look at the origins of Christian belief. And I think the strong historical credibility around them, and really a lot of the incentive structures would have been running in the opposite direction of the things that they were saying at the time. So it would be hard to actually make sense of it as sort of originating from
right.
a noble lie perspective. So
Right.
I would say, yeah, if drawing those lines, I think is probably how I would start to carve it up. But it's a good question. I think you're right, Jim. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you'd be foolish to say that any religion is free of abuse and lying, even
Yeah.
if you think the fundamentals are true. Of course, they have been co-opted and hijacked and put
You
to
know,
nefarious purposes, no
I
doubt
think
about
I
it.
think it is interesting that we should see, the entire Socratic school, in which I include Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, etc. They are dudes who very much ran afoul of popular religion, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. You know what I mean? Who were, I mean, like they define philosophy in a lot of ways as in opposition to this abused mythology, right?
Yep.
And I think like what's more surprising with Aristotle, which would surprise me, okay, because early on in the metaphysics, he says stuff like, I know the poets say this, but the hell with the poets. And what he's saying is the hell with popular religion, right? Okay, I know the poets say humans should be concerned with human things. No, man, let's go ahead and like be deities ourselves and know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's giving a big fu to the religion as he's inherited at that time, and even it sounds like religion per se. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why I was surprised to find this passage where he's saying, but there's an insight behind these mythologies. It's like actually Aristotle comes out softer on popular religion than I was expecting him to be.
Right. Yeah. That's a good.
Yeah. But he is open, like any member of the Socratic school, to like the possibility of deception and abuse that may have gone on in this. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
of course, Lewis has his sort of meta narrative of all of this. Like
Yeah.
these myths serve as a basis to make people ready for the real myth, or the myth
Yeah.
become fact, or that's how he sort of thought of
like,
Christianity, which is interesting. Yeah.
I kind of, I would like to spend some time thinking about this passage in light of some of the stuff that Carl Jung does.
Yeah.
On like what he sees as both the bona fide like fictional like status of myth, but also its veridicality. He doesn't think those are exhaustive things, right? Bernardo Kastrup's book on religious myth is brilliant on this. Right?
And I see Kevin's mentioning Jordan Peterson. He seems to he's very Jungian in a sense as well. And Kevin brings up the Old Testament like Genesis is a noble lie. Yeah, I guess I would say, a noble lie is something where you like really are, at least for Plato, like they knew this wasn't true, right? But it had to be done. Whereas I think if you look at the genre of Genesis and you think that it's plausible that this is some sort of mytho-history, I don't think you have to think of it as a lie. I think it's a certain myth that set out a creation myth that has deep truths embedded that is meant to be a corrective to other creation myths of the time.
Or to think of it in Jungian terms, it's a paradigmatic structure of human consciousness to approach the world this way.
Right.
That's not a lie, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whereas Plato's like the noble lie. You go to Republic, it's like, look, now we just got to tell people this, right?
We're gonna have to make it. No, he's literally like, these guys are not going to go to battle the way we need them to,
right?
Live in the afterlife, so we better hook them on that notion.
Yeah, right. So, and if people want to get more up to speed on that, we've got our 10-part series on the Republic. Gonna put the plug in there. Hope people enjoy it.
If you want our 10-part series on why you should not trust the face value of Plato, there it is.
It's so funny. It's I love the Republic so much, as you know, but I struggle with that part of it, man. I still do, and I know we had a deep conversation about it at once we got to that point. That was a very good one, and I just love the Republic so much. But there's just certain things in there, But certainly understandable why they are there, right?
I just got done teaching my ethics class for the semester, and we do the Republic in there, and a lot of my students have had Republic in other classes where they kind of got it straightforward, Plato's a dualist, and it's all about defending the afterlife and all that. And they take my class, and I do my I think this is a much spookier book than you think it is, and I think Plato's actual intentions are much more complicated than you think it is, and it blows those kids away. It really does.
Yeah. You got to assign them Gerson, man, because Gerson has shifted my interpretation and understanding of Plato significantly as well, including just a lot of his argumentation that I didn't quite either get before or like see as all that plausible.
Yeah.
Now maybe it's a bit contrived and Gerson's kind of,
Yeah.
putting a little muscle on it that wasn't originally there, but
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I said, so if people aren't familiar, I've been a fan of Gerson for a while, but his book Platonism and Naturalism probably is like the top book for me that I've read in the past year. It's just phenomenal on so many scores.
Nice.
And his thesis is really strong because his whole thesis is like, look, you're either a Platonist or you're a naturalist, right? There's no middle ground and there's no trying to strike a compromise between these positions. And if you're a naturalist, philosophy is impossible. Philosophy is incompatible with naturalism. That's his thesis that he argues throughout the entire book, right? Now, Platonism is a big tent for him. For him, Aristotle's a Platonist, Aquinas is a Platonist, and all these things. But he also thinks that Platonism is marked by a series of anti-nominalist, anti-reductivist, anti-materialist, anti-skeptical, all those things. And he also wants to argue that those things are sort of a package deal for the modern naturalist. Like if you're a nominalist, you really need to be a skeptic, right? So it's like there's all these contrived attempts to kind of like, have your nominalism, but avoid your skepticism, stuff like that. So Gerson's project is phenomenal. I think it's relevant to so many different areas of thinking and current debate. So I cannot recommend it enough.
I want everybody to say hi to my guy, Cormac here.
What up, Cormac?
That's Cormac. That's my youngest.
Welcome to the show, brother. Solidarity.
Sit, go, get your head in there so they can see you.
Hello.
See that face. Always good to have a special guest here.
All right, started. Yeah, you're like trying to do serious philosophy, and I'm showing off Cormac.
Yeah.
That's my line.
Yeah, totally. Couple more. Kevin says maybe I've misunderstood the meaning of noble lie because I didn't mean to be dismissive or insulting towards Genesis. No, man, not at all. I think a lot of people think that maybe a noble lie is just a myth. But that's where you're not trying to like intentionally deceive people or something like that. But that's definitely not what's going on in the Republic. Like they know this just isn't true.
Yeah.
Straight up.
In how it's used in a popular way, I think that might be different too. And we were just talking about specifically like when you get into where that comes up in the Republic, it's like it looks like and you have to be careful. Is this Plato or is this just the character of Socrates that he's created for the sake of this dialogue? Which in many ways might just be a lampoon of that very character too. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That he it's clear what he's saying there is we're going to have to tell people some things that we don't really care if they're true or not, right? In order to get them to play their role that we need in society.
Yeah. Right?
That sounds like the very kind of mythological distortion that Aristotle has in mind.
Right. Yeah, totally. Brendan says, about this research project, it seems to resemble the numinous experience idea in Father Spitzer's work, The Souls of a Yearning. Yeah, I actually like that book a lot. And he draws on Newman and he actually brings in Tolkien. So talk about myths. He brings in Tolkien.
I would say you're going to find that same appeal to numinosity in, Rudolf Otto, who like actually coined the term, right? And in Jung and some of these like depth psychologists too. Yeah.
It's Woe says this conversation reminds me of the Lewis line of people possibly needing to become good pagans before becoming Christians.
Or I think maybe it should. I mean, like and I might open you to the possibility that there is, in fact, a good paganism, right?
I mean, I went through paganism before I became a Christian, right? For sure. I was all about it. So that was for me, anyways. I went through that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's see. Maybe we'll grab one more.
Can I say one more quick thing about?
Yeah, say one more quick thing, and we'll close out. Yep.
So I've decided next semester for my sins, I'm going to teach the Timaeus in my I'm going to teach in my intro class for my sins. I'm going to teach Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound.
Okay.
I always begin with the tragedy, as you know, right? All my classes begin with tragedy.
Yep.
We're going to read Prometheus Bound. Then we're going to do the Timaeus, and then we're going to do these selections from Aristotle. Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting, the Timaeus, I didn't notice this before. I went on this like Republic kick that I've been on for the last few years.
Yep.
Okay. The Timaeus starts like the morning after the party. Like Socrates is back in Athens after partying all night with the boys in the Republic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's like the morning after that kegger, right?
Right. It's the hangover. Yeah.
And he like half drunk starts like spouting about the perfect society and then passes out. Okay. And then Timaeus becomes the main speaker of the dialogue, and he gives this cosmology, which is not, I mean, it doesn't quite fit what goes on in the Republic. Okay. And then the Critus is this sequel to the Timaeus never finished, where you get the Atlantis myth. Okay. And the Atlantis is this like perfect society that became too arrogant, and then they get their ass whipped. So I wonder if like this is revealing what Aristotle, like what Plato's actual attitude to Socrates is in the Republic. You know what I mean? He's spouting on, half drunk, hungover, about ideal societies, and what we get is this like very kind of anti-humanist, and not in a bad sense, cosmology. Like humans are not the pinnacle of this thing. There's this whole world soul that we fit into. And be careful with your perfect society talk, because that's hubris. Right?
Yeah.
That's hubris. You'll go the way of the Atlantans if you do that. Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder, and once again, I think it plays in with the passage we're looking at for Aristotle too, because every philosophy has its time, but it's going to pass too.
Right. Yeah.
Don't get your hopes up like your generation got this right.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right. Perfect. We'll close it there. Before we do announcements, what are you working on? What should people check out? I know you got a couple new Substacks, right?
I've got mention those. The Substack stuff keeps going, right? I got another one I think I'm going to start this week, but the most recent one is on Marx's Capital, Technology, and the Notion of Human Obsolescence. So it's one of the odder ones I've written. So have a standard. Also, you'll find a link in that Substack. So I'm doing a course for an organization called Morbid Anatomy. It's called Living and Dying with the Machine. So it's on the perennial relationship between humanity, technology, and mortality. Right. So that'll be starting in January. So if you're into that, have a look at that course. Right. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm linking. I'm trying to grab our Substacks and link them below. What's yours again? Substack.com.
It's just like JD Madden's Substack or JD Madden's newsletter.
There it is. I got it. Links are coming in the chat box, and then they'll be in the comments afterwards as well. And Jim and I are both actually active on our Substack, so I want to say that I think it's worth actually subscribing to ours, and they're both free as well. I don't charge. People generously donate on mine. I'll happily accept that if you want to do the subscription. I'm not going to turn it down, but I keep the content all free there as well. Yeah, I do too. Jim.
Yeah, I admit my Substacks are like probably too big to be helpful, and I
do. I've always, I've blogged for many years, and one of the benefits of that, as I'm sure you've realized, Jim, is like it's just sort of a testing ground for ideas and getting rough drafts going, which can evolve over time and become greater projects. And I think that's I've written a number of books as you have, and I think one of the advantages that I've had is like I've just sort of always been writing in some places, right? And a lot of people who don't do that then get a book project. They just can't do it because they don't have any material. They haven't been in the habit of writing. So
I find it's an interesting way of thinking aloud, but in a way that makes me a little more responsible. And then I'm going to put it out publicly. So I could be humiliated by what I say in there. Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think there's something healthy about that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll say this is like, okay, that second panpsychism one I did, I think I'm going to turn that into a paper that I'm going to submit. I think
good.
And the 3-part thing on philosophy and locality, that is basically my ethics class.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So and it's helped me develop some of those ideas. So really what you're seeing me is just going into my own laboratory with that.
Yeah, 100%. I hope people enjoy it. We appreciate you guys. So please do like, share, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next video back soon with more Aristotle.